Good morning. It's so good to see you here.
It's good to see and hear you.
Barb and Arnie, you are going to be talking with me about your experience with working with Atlanta Seniors Real Estate. And it's been several months since you all closed on your new house and sold the old house. So I'm sure there's quite a lot to talk about.
A lot. A lot of stuff.
First of all, just tell me and the listeners just a little bit about your background. And you're in Georgia now, but are you from Georgia? How did you get here?
Okay. You want to?
Well, we're originally from New Hampshire. Then we both moved at different times in our lives to Florida. And from Florida, we moved up here to Georgia.
We've been residents in Georgia for 6 years.
Yeah, no, I thought it was longer than that for some reason. I think in all of our conversations, I just felt that you'd been here longer. So, okay. And then when you came here, you bought this lovely house, which we are calling Toad Manor. Or you had called Toad Manor.
I called it Toad Manor because it was not lovely. It was a toad. And it was not a manor.
Tell us just a little bit about what you bought and why you bought where you did.
Okay. We had been looking to buy something within a reasonable distance of our children who lived in Stone Mountain. And at the time that we bought it, about 6 years ago, when we came to Georgia, we had, there wasn't a lot to find 6 years ago. So we kept driving by Toad Manor, this house. At the time I called it the Tomato Soup House. It was painted the color of sunflowers on the outside with trim, the color of Campbell's tomato soup. It was really ugly. And if that wasn't ugly enough on the outside with the grown-up yard and everything, it was really bad on the inside. But Arnie has vision, and we both like to put love on old houses.
Yeah.
So after a while, we decided that after looking at it a couple of times, we decided, this would be a good house for us to renovate and use as a part-time retirement job, but also to bring my mom down to Georgia. She was starting to need some care. So we renovated part of the house to accommodate her needs, including a chairlift and a little suite for her. And we went about that over the course of five years.
There's another factor that should probably be expressed is when you look at a house such as Toad Manor, don't get discouraged with what the building looks like, from appearances. What you want is a building that has sound studying and what they call good bones. This house, where it wasn't very attractive, it did have good bones, something to work with. It was well built, put together well. So that was another consideration for doing what we did.
And the house, so you said you were looking to bring your mother with you and have her in the house for you. So did you have to modify the house in any way in order to accommodate her?
We sure did, yeah. Her suite was an upstairs suite, and this house was 3 floors. So we had to put a chairlift in, and so that she wouldn't have to be continually going up and down, even from the 2nd floor to the 3rd, we put a small, took one of the bedrooms, remodeled it as a sitting room with a small refrigerator, a microwave, a little heater. It put in new electrical all through that could accommodate that, and really a lovely bedroom for her. And then we did a handicapped accessed bathroom upstairs for her. So she really had a suite that she was frail when she came, but if she got to the point where she couldn't come down at all, she would be self-contained up there, and we could bring everything she needed. And indeed, the day came where she was on hospice, and it worked out really, really well. She loved her space when she came, and we felt good about being able to do that. It was one of the big pluses of that house, which we really came to love, and really tongue-in-cheek ended up calling it Toad Manor because it was a pretty house by the time we finished.
it was certainly a pretty house once I came to see it. So by the time I saw it, I was like, Toad Manor, okay. The Toad Manor is so significant because it comes from the storybook.
Yes, a very significant story to us. It's one of the books that I read to my children when they were growing up, and we still tease each other about who's what character, who's Toad and who's Badger and who's Ratty, and so it's sort of a family legend that still lives on. But also for the two of us, the significance is that Mr. Toad in The Wind and the Willows by Kenneth Grahame lived at Toad Hall. We substituted manor instead of Toad Hall. And he was an adventurer. And that's what we wanted to be after we retired. We wanted to get in the caravan, the camper, and head off to wild and adventurous places and channel the spirit of Mr. Toad from Toad Manor. And indeed we did.
Well, as long as you didn't run a ruckus on the road with any sports cars that he...
Well,
there's a story in there.
Too.
So I thank you for bringing Wind in the Willows back to me, because that was a gift you gave to me. And I started to read the book after we had closed. And then I found it on audio, and so I listened to it, and I was in stitches, giggling, just at the beauty of how he writes, but also the storytelling. It's great, and I forgot how good it was.
Allegory on friendship.
Yes.
The importance of being in community and relationship. And we were talking last night in anticipation of talking with you today, and we said one of the things that we really fiercely appreciated about you was that you fully embraced the story of Toad Manor, to the point where all of a sudden we realized you were not referring to the Conyers property and the Stone Mountain property. You were talking about Toad Manor, and then the property in Stone Mountain we named also, and you refer to the property in Stone Mountain as the name that we chose for that property. And it made it fun and lighthearted, and it just added a whole nother dimension to working together, being in relationship, being in community, having a positive attitude through an emotional transitional time of life.
Yeah. And I thank you for saying that, because you allowed that to happen, you both, by naming the place. So having some connection and a story to go with it in that way, it made it easier for me to do that. So it was so easy and it was enjoyable. So one of the questions that I do have for you is, what prompted you to consider this late life move at this point after only being in that home for 6 years?
Market.
Huh?
Market was one thing.
Yeah.
Mom had passed. So with her passing, we found ourselves in a 3-story home.
Yeah.
With rooms we didn't even go in. We just didn't need the space. The configuration wasn't great. We wanted to be nearer to the kids. Even though it was only 45 minutes, we're now 12 minutes from them. And it doesn't sound like a big difference. It's monumental. They can drop the dog off 3 times a week for us to babysit. We can pop over if we want to share some homemade bread. We're back and forth. In the first month, we saw them more than we had in the whole past year. It's the distance because of course they're working busy, demanding jobs, and distance matters. So I think market, the fact that we didn't have caregiving responsibilities anymore, the configuration of the house, it was just a good time to make that decision. That being said, we didn't just say, hey, let's sell a house. If you recall, we met with you a year before.
Yes.
Sold that house.
Yes, I really wanted to touch on that actually, because that was an important step, and it's often important for many of the people I work with, in the sense that this is not, oh, let me sell my house and the house goes on the market within a month or so, or a day or 2. That is not the process we take. So let's talk about that a little bit. There's 2 parts to this. One is there's the logistics and one is the emotions. Let's start with the logistics. We met a year out. How did you find me, if you remember that, and why did you choose this process?
If I am recalling right, I think you had another home in the community listed, which meant that you were familiar with the neighborhood and the greater area, and that you were more than likely a local realtor. Then I went on and researched you and saw that you had this extra designation where you chose to serve seniors, and we're at that age. So that made it doubly intriguing. And so I called and just said, we're not doing it this minute, but we are planning a move. What extra incentive does it offer someone of our age to choose a realtor with the extra designations that you have, and with an interest in working with cranky old people?
Yeah.
Not cranky.
No, we're not funny.
Yeah, and so we talked on the phone for a little bit, and I think our first meeting was it in person or the first meeting was in person?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I came by and visited with you just to see the house and to get a real understanding of you both. Arnie, you were on your way out, so we didn't meet the first time.
Right.
We met, but we didn't talk as much the first time. But you got a lot of information on the back end, of course, after we'd met. What were the selecting factors for you? What was the discussion or what came out of the discussion that led to, yeah, we need to go through this process, and sure, we're going to choose Hillary or Atlanta Seniors Real Estate?
Well, I think I just liked your personality, and I liked the fact that you seemed to understand, where we were coming from. You could, I like the fact that you related to us, not in so much a realtor, but as a person trying to help us navigate this upcoming event that we were planning on taking.
Right.
And that's the way I felt through the whole process, that you just really knew what we were going through, and you kind of steered us when we got a little nervous. You kind of settled us down, and it was just a wonderful experience. We've myself anyways, because before Barb and I married, I'd moved a number of times, and you by far were one of the best realtors agents that I've dealt with. You weren't pushy. You weren't you were anything but pushy. You just made us, or made me anyways, feel very at ease, and like this is going to work out. We did have a few places that we looked at and put bids down on, and it didn't come to fruition, but you still maintained that we would find something, and indeed we did. So can't thank you enough for your leadership in this role. It was just amazing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that so much. And that's really the designation it's two things. The designation gives us the technical, the theory and how to do certain things. But of course, there is something that's built in within those of us who do this work. And there is a specific way of handling people, to the point where, my motto is real estate is more than property. It's about people. I have to work with the people. It's a holistic approach as to what's going on in your life. What do you need? What is your goal? And let's go from that aspect. So moving on to Barb, you had a very specific plan written out, and it was actually wonderful to see that. Not everybody does that. But that allowed me to see something that I could say, okay, I can contribute with information on certain areas. But that was something you had to do.
Arnie and I have used this model many times, mostly at times of transition, when we're going to change jobs or retire or make a major purchase or move. It is a model that we call our quality life. And it is a big old circle divided into pieces of pie. It's a pie chart. And it allows us to look at each piece of the pie. where we want to live, how we want to live, who we want to live near. So it looks at all aspects of a quality life, the spiritual aspect, the financial aspect, housing, relationships, a community. It looks at all aspects of your life and asks us to examine what's important to us. And will making this decision fit with our conception of a quality life? So we did it for a move, for a house. So it had to be basically within a certain distance of the kids, had to be in a safe neighborhood, had to be one level. As we worked it through, we began to define the characteristics of a home that would fit our needs. And we were willing to work, and like you said many times, trust the process, trust the process. She repeated it many times, and we were willing to do that. And that's so key. Figure out, be planful if possible, to the extent possible. And we are very methodical, very planful.
It's interesting because once I saw that and I could fit into that, saying trust the process was about trusting my process, which is the real estate piece of the process, but also trusting your process and bringing those two pieces together. I was able to say at one point, I think, in fact, what mattered most was the end result, because then we could look at that pie chart and go, oh my gosh. And you showed me that pie chart and you showed me how you had met I think all but one aspect.
Yeah, and probably I forget what it was. It was a lesser.
It wasn't anything major, but I think if I remember correctly, you were saying, well, all but one has been completed. And
that's amazing.
Yeah.
We had right down to nuts and bolts. We had room to park the camper. We have room to park the camper here. It's all on one level. The dog is happy in her front fenced yard. Arnie has an amazing room downstairs, which you have to see for his collection.
I can't wait to see that.
It's great, isn't it?
It's coming along.
It's coming along. It's so pleasant. And you're looking at my studio. You can't see it behind me. It's 3/4 set up, and I'm almost back to work in the studio. Finding his house was a process, and we had to trust it. And occasionally, your trust ebbs and flows that the process is going to work out for you. Right. So you were there when it ebbed, and you were there when it flowed, and what a good time we had.
Oh my gosh, we were on an adventure. We really were on a Wind in the Willows adventure.
Yes.
So when I think about that story and our journey together, it's just, I think that's probably what made me giggle more, is even though there weren't exactly the same things that were happening, it's like, gosh, just remember that house there in that location where the landscaping was beautiful. The community was absolutely fantastic. And then you get in the house and it was so dark and dingy. And it's like, we want that house though. We want that house. And then thinking back on it, it's like, how would that house have worked compared to the house you're actually in?
Oh, right. Well, remember we kept, I call it the little green notebook. We kept a notebook, and we did a lot of research online, and then eliminating possibilities. But if there was a possibility, we'd write it down, and then we would go drive the neighborhood. And that cut the list way down.
Oh, yes.
To a few. So then we would go out with you. Well, when at the end of the whole thing, I went back and counted up how many places had we considered online, did drive-bys, neighborhood drive-bys, and then some we went and looked at. The total was 232 homes that we sat together and considered online first.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And I think 232 drive-bys. So
hold on, 232 homes were considered at home at the computer. You drove by?
I think it was 32.
If we average out how many times we went out, and we did about 3, I think we probably looked at about maybe 15 homes.
Probably.
Like that.
Yeah, in that ballpark, yeah.
It might be more because, it might be more because when we settled on the area where you currently are, we looked at a number of homes in there. So it might be a little bit more. So let's say between 15 and 20 homes, and then we put offers on about 5. Mm-hmm. What the initial one that stuck was just problematic. Same community where you are, but problematic. Yeah. And then other offers, either one accepted one because there was a multiple offer, one because of contingency, in fact, a couple because of contingency, And yeah, just things that in real estate world just weren't suitable for them.
Right. And the planets aligned on this house because it was an unusual situation.
It was indeed. And so I want to talk about that a little bit before we touch on emotions, because we talked about two things and you helped me make that journey. And I really want to ask about your emotions for that. The house that you found was not on the market.
Correct.
And it's important to say that once you've selected a neighborhood, and this is the journey for you all, was that, we were looking in a certain area. So let's say Stone Mountain as a whole. You knew the distance you needed to be from your children, your adult children. And then you found this neighborhood and said, this is the one.
Yeah.
But how can we get in here? Because you had selected the community, you was driving around there looking at houses. And how did you find this one?
We had been by it a number of times, and it looked like maybe somebody was living in it, but it was very unkept. The front yard, it's up on a little bit of a knoll, so the front yard was really high grass. One of the times, after we had not gotten the last house in here, we came over to do some more drive-bys, and Arnie said, let's just go in and drive that neighborhood one more time. And I said, no, I don't want to, I'm discouraged. And no, let's just go do it. We did. We drove in a different direction that day. And as we drove by this house up on the knoll, we saw a glint in the front yard through the grass. And I stopped. There's a sign there, and it might be a for sale sign that's fallen down. Well, indeed it was. So we stopped, and I got out and hiked through the high grass and took a picture of the sign and sent it to you and said, here's a long shot.
Yeah.
But from the road, it's a nice location. Looks like it needs love for sure. Looks like there might be somebody in it, but it's really got an abandoned / occupied look.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? And you took it from there.
Yeah, and that was so interesting that, I have these, I say that I love to do research. I'm that person, I'm digging deep, and sometimes unnecessarily, of course, but I'm digging deep. So when you sent me that, I was like, oh, and the first thing I did was pull up the address, and it had been sold recently. Within, I want to say it was 6 months or so, something like that. And it had been sold, and it's like, oh, okay, well, we could have let it go there. But no, because I wanted to know more on why the sign was still there, and we wanted this community. Mr. Agent. So I get on the phone and I make some phone call, and I finally get the agent, and he says, oh, interestingly enough, the people who bought it as an investment property, but they haven't figured out what to do with it yet. So there's a caretaker there staying there, but we're thinking of reselling it. I literally said, I have a couple who are trying to get closer to their kids, and this is the community they've chosen. We keep losing bids just because of the situation of the market at the moment. Would you entertain an off-market offer? And he was like, well, the numbers would have to make sense. So then it got into discussion, and I was like, oh, okay, let's see how this works out. So it was gathering information from him, coming back to you. You all got excited about it. And I'm like, okay, hold on now. We don't have everything in order. We need to make sure it's going to work. So what do you think? Shall I go back with an offer and see? So we did. And we did the tennis match. As I say, it's like playing tennis. We go back and forth with some little detail just to make sure it's going to work out before we wrote that offer. And we wrote that offer and managed to get it. And it was probably, there's nothing easy about real estate transactions per se, but I want to use that word, is that this happened to be so not comfortable, because now I'm thinking about the story, but there was something about it that made it easier. It's almost as though this was your house from the get-go. You had seen it, and it was just about getting it. And so that journey from seeing that sign in the yard to us getting a close done with it, even though there was some crazy things in the middle of it, we got there.
Persistence.
Yeah.
You were really persistent.
Oh my gosh.
And open-minded, because we would have conversations where we'd toss ideas back and forth about what ifs and strategize, and then you would just take it and execute, and it worked. It was amazing.
Yeah, and it was kind of exciting to, I think back about some of the transactions that I do with people. And this one we had so many twists and turns and things happening from the sale of your home through to finding a home to the closing of your home. So bringing all that together. And I will say this, and I felt good that I was working with you on the sale of your home, and I knew who I was working with on the purchase of your home, me, which meant that we could really converse and thrash out the ideas as detailed as possible, because we're on both sides trying to make it work. It would have or could have been complex, more so, if there was another agent involved. Not saying it never works, but it would have just caused maybe a little bit more anxiety in there, I think.
It definitely would have. And I just want to, before I lose this thought, one thing that we really appreciated, there's only so much anxiety and stress that someone our age can bear. And we were very aware along the process, the technical process of everything, that you were working in the background doing 3 times what we were aware of. We knew you were doing that, but we also knew that you were astute enough to present us with the details that we needed for our decision making, and to not burden us with excess things that might happen or might not happen. What we got was definitive information that we could use to plan and make decisions. And so I think that is a skill that could easily be overlooked if you didn't understand that really on the site, you were talking to all of these people on our behalf. And so if anybody ever says, I'll just sell my house myself, not in this environment, you'll cost yourself more money than you'll spend.
Absolutely. And that's actually fact, and that's researched.
Well, and the other thing that's kind of remarkable is, yes, we took about a year in this process, but when it came down to selling the house and buying another house, it happened quite quickly.
Yeah.
And, you were able to, work your magic, really. And, because we weren't sure when we sold our house whether, because we didn't have a house at the time.
Right.
So we thought maybe we were going to be homeless. but it was amazing. It was a process. But when it came to the actual point where we're going to make the decision and whatnot, it just kind of just fell right in. I mean,
it worked, and it worked because you all had a plan, and I executed according to your plan. And I knew that you would prefer to move out of one and into another. So we weren't going to do this like, let's just sell your house and put you in a camper van forever. We wanted to make sure there was something that could fit perfectly for you. It's never going to be the exact how somebody pictures it, but we can work with a plan, right? Once you say, this is what we'd prefer to do, then we can work with that. So it was ideal. So, and again, it was trust the process, is one of my sayings. But also, Arnie, you gave me something quite early on. And I think, let me say this first. Getting to know you over the process before we put your house on the market was perfect. Because now I know who I'm working with. I know your temperament. I know what you're willing to kind of accept or not accept. I know your plan. So we can use that as well. But understanding who you were and how you worked made a huge difference. So that prep time of having that conversation early, ahead of time, you hadn't planned to put the house on the market, but we worked towards putting the house on the market. So in your cases, what do I need to do to make the house ready for the market? And so you spent a few months doing that. And in total, that getting to know you preparing the house allowed that execution to happen the way it did. And then what I was going to say, there was a moment where we identified that Barb likes to look around corners.
Yes, I do. On the big what if.
This is the what if corner. So Barb was like, but what if this, and what if that, and what if this, and what if that? And so Arnie, somehow, I can't remember how, do you remember how this worked? And somehow we was like, okay, hold on a minute, we're going to stop looking around corners. Do you remember that conversation?
Yeah. It was always, always looking at, I don't know how to really explain it, but looking for something that really isn't there.
Yeah, I do that. I do that.
Just
Once in a while it works. Most of the time it doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's perfect, because that was something that I could implement. And once I realized that that was your habit, and Arnie was kind of like, we don't know that yet. I believe the conversation was when we were on your patio at Toad Manor. We were out on the deck, and we were talking through some plans, and you were asking a series of questions, and I was like, well, we don't have the answer to that until we know the next thing. And Arnie said something about stop looking around the corners, so it came out in conversation. I was like, So I was then able to say, that's around the corner, we don't know yet. And I just eliminated talking about those around the corner scenarios with you. And that helped the stress.
Doing it, but you were able to divert me. And it was insightful for me. Maybe I learned, maybe I didn't, but maybe I learned something. Maybe I learned something.
Still do it occasionally, like to do it just because.
Never.
Wow. But so that is all of that. It really leads to my next question, which is associated to the first, which is, you went through logistics and emotions. And what were the emotions? And you've touched on some of them a little bit already, but can you identify some of the emotions? And really this question is, I guess, for other people to realize there are going to be emotions. But if you're able to kind of identify a couple or a few emotions that was with you throughout the journey.
First, we look at leaving, and then leaving a house and the emotions involved in saying goodbye to Toad Manor. And then if we talk about the emotions of getting a new house, it is for us, it's all sort of one process, but it was very difficult to leave Toad Manor. As much as I didn't want that particular house in the beginning, we had put blood, sweat, and tears into it. It was an Audubon certified wildlife sanctuary. By the time we left, we had gotten that designation. That's how much we loved on that house and enjoyed bird watching from the deck. Arnie had rolled his sleeves up and renovated it inside and out, painted the outside. There was a lot of work and emotion in leaving it. We did come to a point where, with your help, we were able to realize, okay, but we own all of that. Another person coming in is possibly not going to care for the gardens, not going to care that there are gardens, not going to care what comes up in the spring. They're going to let the asparagus patch go wild all winter, and they don't care. And therefore, it's not in our best interest to care either. So we had to develop a detachment, and that was a process. Part of the process, and I wanted to mention this earlier, was that during that year-long adjustment and preparation period, we took a 2-month trip. We took off for 2 months and actually spent a lot of time preparing for it. So that whole year was not all about house, other than to say that trip helped us come back refreshed, ready to hit the ground running with the transition, ready to let go of the other one. So do what you have to do to detach and let go, and somehow in your own mind resolve that this is your beloved home. It will be somebody else's the day you sign papers. And it's not in your best interest to be possessive or attachment is just not a good thing in a real estate transaction.
Correct.
To the extent that you're able to do that, you'll do yourself a big favor.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, there were no tears at the closing. We laughed
That's right. We had a lot of fun.
And lucky us, we got buyers that we were thrilled for them.
I remember you saying and we decided that was a perfect way of departing, and the detachment that was needed was in all of the love, blood, sweat, and tears that you gave to that house. You were also preparing it for another family, and the preparation for another family who was going to come and love the home and raise their family was the best scenario that you could have, and that's what you got. Yeah, so that journey is wonderful. I think that I would like to go back to Arnie a little bit and touch on that story that you were giving, is the emotion of putting in an offer and not having it accepted. We saw that a couple of times. So I just want to go back to Arnie.
We put an offer in on this house. We didn't get it, and we're both kind of down that we didn't. But as it turns out, I'm glad we didn't, because it was not the house for us.
Right.
And so, if you see a house and you think you want it, sometimes it's not the house that you really want, because we looked at many after that, and they were, some were better, some were not. But, it is an emotional time when you put in an offer in a house, because, it just the way the process works.
Yeah.
But in that particular process, I'm happy every day of my life that, they turned us down, because it just wasn't the house for us.
Right.
This one was much better suited to where.
And for one, it was in the wrong location. You were compromising to stay in that location because the house and the neighborhood looked right. But actually now you're 12 minutes away. You would have still been 35 minutes or 30 minutes away at that other house. So it always works out, right? I think putting that all into one big explanation is, if you have a plan, you trust the plot process, and you believe in what you are doing, then the outcome will work out in your favor. And that takes a lot of trust. Not of me necessarily, but of the whole thing.
Right.
And I truly believe that's where you sat in the first place, is this is going to work out eventually. And with my prompting of trust the process, it allowed you to see that we're getting there. So good job on you guys for having a very clear plan and some specifics about what you were willing to take and not willing to take. And you were willing to compromise. It's not that you weren't, you were willing to compromise. But I think, you and I will say the universe answered to some of what you needed to be in place, because each time you compromised, it turned out that wasn't quite where you should be.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, we couldn't be more thrilled with the house we got.
Yeah.
It was, of all the houses we looked at, this is, the one that fits us the best. So, we may have gotten discouraged along the way and had some high emotion, but in the end, it worked out perfectly.
I think there's probably not a day that goes by that we don't point out something about this house to each other that we love. Like, did you see that the herd of deer's in the backyard? We have a herd of deer that come in, not a deer, a herd. Did you see the deer were in the yard? Or just go into the living room and see the sunlight streaming in. Or, oh my God, look at those hardwood floors.
That you found on Humbug.
That we found under the ugliest, dirtiest carpet you could ever imagine. We suspected it was there.
Yeah.
But it was really there. I think every day we say something positive.
Yeah. That's awesome.
We owe you a debt of gratitude for that, because, without your perseverance and your research on this house, it may not have happened. So, we can't thank you enough, for your stick-to-itiveness and all that you did along the journey.
You're welcome.
You said earlier, we've moved a lot. We bought and sold a lot. We've moved a lot. We're kind of adventurers. This was different. We're 74 going on 75. And this is it. This is our last purchase. It's definitely our last renovation, but it's our last big purchase. And this one's for us. This one we're not renovating to sell.
Yeah. So that's a good transition to, you chose a house for you all. Not everybody's willing to do that, but for you all, you wanted one more project. That's how you had said it to me early on. And you didn't mind having one more project. You would have preferred not to, perhaps, but one more project would have been a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
Do you still feel that way?
Oh yeah. This is a real doable project. It's not like the ones we've been involved in the past. I mean, this is more cosmetic. There's no time schedule to do this or do that. So it's a much laid back operation too, as we go forward. So, if we decided tomorrow that we didn't want to pursue any further renovations, we could do that too.
It's livable.
Exactly.
It's comfortable and but for anybody that young or old, it works.
Yeah.
The biggest project was the first project. It needed a deep cleaning. I mean, every inch of it needed a deep cleaning, because you had mentioned there was a caretaker in it. Well, we call him the I don't caretaker, because it was it was in need of a serious cleaning before we could really draw a breath in it. So
the great thing about was your vision. You said Arnie had vision, but you too have vision. You both have vision. In that once we got inside to see this house, the first thing was like, but you saw past all of that, the dirty kitchen, the things that were, the carpet had spillage on, those kinds of things, and the dust and the dirty curtains, whatever it was, which, showed that the house hadn't been loved for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we saw the I don't caretaker. I love that term. You always give me a new term to work with. What is that? And so we saw the room where they were, and it's like we could barely get in to see the space that had. But you were visionary in the sense of you knew that you were willing to take on a small project, as you've now defined it, and that you might have to take on a small project in the price point that you were looking at.
Right.
So I think that's something else we should mention. I don't want to mention numbers exactly, but when you're looking for something in a specific price point, in the markets that you're in, at that time, because every real estate market is different month to month, they can be very different. You have to be considerate of, what are you going to compromise with or not? And this was a good example of, yes, we're willing to take on a little bit of a project because we know we're going to need to, otherwise we have to spend much more. So just before we push out, I do want to talk about the financial side of things, because you did something quite interesting in terms of how you afforded the next home. We worked very close. Well, the initial conversation that we had, over a year ago to start this whole journey was, how are you going to pay for the next home? Do you have enough equity out of the first home to be able to buy the next home? And while the market was a good market at the time, it meant that every penny you would get out of equity would have to be put into the next home. There was no way to buy less of a home. So we looked at that. You managed your finances on your side, and I looked at what tools might be available to you and presented you with the idea of talking to someone about a home equity conversion mortgage. Would you tell us a little bit about that experience and who you worked with and how the relationship you had with the person who helped you on that journey?
We worked with Fairways Mortgage Company. They're a lender that specializes in HECM loans, home equity conversion mortgages. And although we had, with our work over the 6 years at the old home, we had almost doubled the value of that home, just what you said. In this particular market, in order to acquire another home, we would have to spend every penny of it. So that meant we would have to get creative. And we worked with a lady named Jeannie McGee, who was really wonderful, informative, patient. We talked with her multiple times about multiple options and made sure that we completely understood the consequences of a HECM loan. We then went to our children and explained to them that what we were considering. It's the model of the old reverse mortgage, but it's much different now. The terms, the consequences, everything is really quite different. So we wanted them to understand and have some input, because this is their inheritance, or not. We wanted to know what's more important to you, that we stay independent as long as possible in our own home, or that you get a windfall when we're done with this home. And their response was, we want you to be safe. We want you to be happy. We think that this decision will do that. We want you to be without financial stress. We think this decision will do that. And so we went with the HECM loan, which means, practically speaking, that we pay the insurance and we pay the taxes on the home that we're in. We can choose not to pay a mortgage payment. And I'm not going to explain HECM loans because anybody can go look it up. And hopefully through Fairways, someplace that is, who does this, not just any loan officer. And get fully informed before we do it. So for us, it made sense. Again, in a difficult market to enter and buy a new home, it made great sense for us. And it means we're not paying a mortgage payment.
Wow. So that was one of the initial things we talked about, is the finances and how that was going to work. So I don't get involved in your finances, but I contribute to helping you make some decisions by bringing tools to the table. And so you both sat down and you specifically went through, and I remember, Arnie, this was your part of the deal really. It's like, what are the numbers? What are the numbers? What are the numbers? When is it going to make sense? How is it going to make sense? You know, all of those things were very, very important. So just from the financial side of things, Arnie, what is your take on the reverse mortgage or the HECM? So it is a reverse mortgage. It has two parts to it. This is how I describe it, and I'm not a financial person, so in terms of the mortgages, how I describe it to help you understand is you can get a reverse mortgage to put on the house you're currently in and stay in that home and have no mortgage payment, or you can use the HECM, the home equity conversion mortgage, and buy another home and use the equity from your current home and plop it into purchasing the new home. The reverse mortgage or the HECM covers the balance that's needed so that you don't have the mortgage payment on the new home. So I just wanted to explain that. So Arnie, tell me about your take on it from the finances.
Well, I think first and foremost, this plan allows us, if one of us should pass before the other, that person is still able to stay in the home.
Right.
Whereas if it wasn't, if we didn't have this plan, that would mean that the surviving person would have to, find other means of shelter, and just that in itself is a lot of peace of mind.
Yeah.
And from the financial standpoint, I think it's just a win-win, because we had the equity from the house that we sold, and we're able to put that towards this home. So it's in a way, it's sort of like you're renting, but you're not having to pay the rent. Yeah.
That's interesting. Don't say that too loud. Yes, but that is the relief that also now gives you money in your pocket to do the things you want to do and travel and enjoy the rest of your life.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And at 75, that taking that pressure off does mean we can relax and enjoy things.
That's awesome.
That's
awesome.
Prices escalate, which they seem to be doing, then we still have money to allocate to those new, rising expenses too, which, takes a lot of stress off, both of us, as far as worrying about, how we're going to pay for this and how we're going to pay for that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the reason why it was set up in the first place several decades ago. And why it makes sense for some. It's not the product for everyone. And I like when clients like yourself actually make a informed decision by gathering as much information as possible, speaking with those who are experts in their field, such as Fairway and Jeannie McGee, and then executing that according to your current financial plan, your wealth situation, your financial wealth situation. How does it all fit in? And if you had a wealth manager, were they willing to work with that and help you through that process too? So, I applaud you for taking that step and making this a reality for your lives. I have another question for you. I have two more questions for you before we end. What advice would you give to other seniors considering a late life move?
Get a good realtor.
Of course.
We were lucky that we had the ability to be mindful and planful about it. And sometimes life doesn't give you that luxury. But to the extent that you are able, think about it ahead. Don't procrastinate. Don't stick your head in the sand. think about, and here I am thinking around corners, but I'm going to advise, think around a few corners. What if chances are one of us is going to be sitting in this house at some point without the other. It's a reality. Suck out the emotion and look at reality and you make some mindful decisions. Practical.
And I think you also have to consider, not to feel guilty making a decision like this, where, you may not have a lot to leave to your children, but, in the meantime, we're able to, live out our remaining years comfortable and safe and, getting some satisfaction of growing old together. So, I mean, it's just, I think it makes sense for people that if they go in with their eyes wide open, they can see the value in it. Excuse me.
Awesome.
We can do more with the kids and be more with the kids without being under the financial pressure of a big mortgage payment. And I should note that we still have a lot of equity in this house, because HECM mortgages don't give you it's not 100% loan. In fact, it's a challenging loan to meet the conditions. I forget what the percentage was. I think we had, was it 60 something percent 60%. We had to bring to the table.
Yeah. So it depends on your age.
You've got good equity in it still, so you're not giving everything up.
Right. I'm glad you made that point, because there are some rules around the HECM that have to be adhered to, and it's not just a come and take this loan and you'll get 50% or get 90% or whatever. So but I always say, just as you've done, is get the information, do your research. Get some education around this product to see if it makes sense for you. But going back a little bit, I love where you ended with, we can live out the best lives we can. We're still close to our children. We're not a burden on them, and we're still enjoying life, right? Because we don't have this additional expense that we have to worry about. Or as well as we bought a house that's closer to our kids, so now the convenience of it all is additional bonus. And it's something I say to a lot of people is, when you're considering a late life move, it's worth considering all factors, and don't rule out one for another without doing the research, because evidently in your case and in several other cases that I've worked with, the home equity conversion mortgage worked out to be the perfect solution that gives you peace of mind. Peace of mind. And then just going back to finding yourself, the right people to work with. And I say this when I do my presentations, find the people who are experts at what they do and delegate the job to them and let them get on with it and do it. Yeah. And they will guide you. If they're professionals in their field, they will guide you. And so for me, I will say that those of you who are listening to this recording and you're thinking about doing this, find yourself a seniors real estate specialist. Absolutely. They're tooled with some information that helps you to make some decisions, as well as tools and resources that help you to get through. So for example, just to touch on it, a general contractor or somebody who could help you paint. We found someone who could help you move. So we had a toolbox of resources and services that we could say, well, what do you need? Okay, try this person. We're not directing you to them, but call them, see how you feel, check them out. Right. And then you use those services. So thank you. Thank you. I do have one more question. It's a fun question, and I want you to answer one of these fun questions. Let's see, which one shall I choose? I have a bag load of questions. Okay, how about, this is good. Imagine your house had a magical room that could instantly transport you anywhere. Where would you go? And what room is it? And then where would you go?
Well, maybe we both. Okay, so because this house is Mini Hammer Knoll, that's its name. I'm going to say that the magical room would be the one that we kept drifting to, and we thought we were going to shut it off and just use it for storage. So I think we'd go sit in the living room, and we would say, we channel Mini Hammer Knoll, and we would be transported to the Shire. in the Hobbit, the movie The Hobbit. Go hang out, right?
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, because Samwise said to Pippin in Tolkien's The Hobbit, "You ninny hammer," and which means you idiot. And we looked at each other and said, "You couple of idiots, you're going to do another renovation at your age." So we named it. We're a couple of ninny hammers, and we're now living in Ninny Hammer Knoll because it sits on a knoll. So that's the answer. We'd sit in our living room and we would go spend a wonderful time riding around the Shire in a caravan with hobbits.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Well,
That's fantastic.
Although I like my room better.
You like the baseball room. He'd probably.
Okay, tell me your
I
story
would probably
then.
go to the Shire. He'd probably go down in his baseball room and go to get transported to Fenway.
Yeah.
Well,
Fenway.
let's hear it, Arnie. So your room, your magical room would be, and where would you go?
Well, my magical room would be the room off the basement. It's in the basement, but it's a separate room. It has two big windows that I get this beautiful, luscious sun coming in, beaming in both windows. So it's very warm and cozy. I have shelving in there for all my memorabilia. I can, kind of retreat there, and the world just sort of goes by, but I'm in my own little world. It's just a pleasant place to be, and I enjoy it immensely. So that's my little.
Oh, so you would stay there. You wouldn't even be transported anywhere. You would just stay there.
That's right.
You wouldn't go to Fenway if the Sox were playing, Red Sox were playing? No,
because I can envision. I've been to Fenway enough. I can envision my sitting there. I can get lost in the memories there. So.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you.
That room has been so fabulous for him. He can't hear me yell to him down there.
Oh dear, you can, Arnie? Oh no.
Yeah. It's a people use the term man cave, but I internalize it as my oasis in a world that's flowing by.
It's a real retreat.
Yeah.
It is.
Oh, that's lovely. But I knew you would give me an exciting story to that question, so thank you very much. It has been such a pleasure to see you both again and have you on this call with me, and for you to share your stories. I appreciate you being so open about it. Thank you.
No, thank
Thank you.
Thank you for our home. We miss talking with you all the time. For maybe a month or so after we closed, we were in Hillary withdrawal because we weren't talking with you all the time.
Because we did a lot of talking. We stayed in touch and communicated about everything and anything.
Yeah.
Even the birthday meltdown, even
that was
everything.
So sad.
We shouldn't, well, let me just add this on to the end. That was an emotional time for you.
It was.
I called it the birthday meltdown, with all due respect, because it was a tough day. Just tell us quickly that story. I might capture that and use that in a different way. But what happened with the birthday meltdown?
The day had gone on and I hadn't heard from any of the kids. And so I was starting to tell myself a story that wasn't true, that the kids had all forgotten. It wasn't true. They just called later in the day. And Arnie, on the other hand, had forgotten. And he remembered later too. And then you called and gave us the news that the house we kind of had our hearts set on, and we were tired at this point, fell through. And I just had a tearful meltdown. And I think I said a very, very bad word that shouldn't come out of the mouth of any woman, any lady. I wasn't a lady about it. It was a tough day. It was. We were tired from showing the other house and keeping it spotless all the time and making that bed just hotel perfect, and grabbing the dog and getting in the car and leaving. And we were tired.
Yeah.
And
wasn't that the day something was happening in the yard also?
Well, probably we came to do the septic tank.
Oh, yes. How could I forget that? Oh, I've wiped it
That was
off.
the clincher.
Yeah,
Yes, they came to dig up the septic to do an inspection on the old house. And I asked the fellow, because we had worked so hard to get the yard just perfect, how big is this going to be? Because I didn't think it was necessary anyway, but how big is this going to be? And he said, we're going to dig a 3x3 hole, access it. Well, let me shorten the story by saying I later measured the mess they made of the front yard, and it was 8x12. And they disrupted stone in a walkway and left a swath of dirt. It was a mess. And so I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I knew that after all the work Arnie had done to get the house ready to sell, he now had this big repair in the front yard to do. And I just felt bad that he had to do that. It was not my best moment, but it was a year, Hillary, the only time I cried in that year was that day. And it felt good to do so.
Yes, just to release it. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know that I was giving you virtual hugs that day because I wasn't able to get to the house, but I knew that I walked away feeling like, oh my gosh, that is too much. And so we had to do something. I think we went out on the road the next day or two to go look at some houses again to just get back to a space of this is going to happen. It's going to be okay.
Right. And you were instrumental in getting me back up on that horse. I mean, as usual, I got over myself really quickly, but that really was a tough moment.
Yeah. So the emotions really can be crazy, depend on what's going on. So
Yeah.
I thank you for sharing that with me again, because I just remembered it and thought we should have brought it in before. But nonetheless, thank you. I love you both. It's been such a pleasure.
We love you.
And I wanted to bring my little friend over. In departing, I wanted to say thank you, and I shall see you very soon from me and him.
Oh, frog, toad.
Little toad that you have blessed me with. So thank you. He sits on my shelf right over there and just sits and looks at me. So I have you in my minds often.
Okay, so lovely.
And I do pray that you both are well and happy, and I will be visiting with you both soon.
Yeah, come by because we do have that bottle of wine that we brought back from the last camping trip where, we went to a winery and a wine tasting. We bought a bottle to share with Hillary.
And how could I forget that? I'll be on my way in a week or so. And that wraps up another insightful episode of Let's Talk Real Estate for Older Adults. I hope you found today's discussion as enlightening and inspiring as our team did. Remember, every transition is a new beginning, and we're here to provide information for you along the journey of downsizing, relocating, or aging in place. If today's conversation got you thinking about your own unique situation, I'd love to chat, so book a call with me and let's figure out the best steps for your next chapter. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe and join our community so you never miss an episode. If you have questions or ideas for a future topic, please reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, I'm Hillary Walker, CEO of Atlanta Seniors Real Estate, signing off. Stay safe, stay positive. Your forever home could be just around the corner. And remember our philosophy? Real estate is more than property. It's about the people.